The shipment arrived at 2 in the morning. No lights, no escort. Just a black paneled truck backing into a loading bay 3 miles west of what the locals still called the old psychiatric facility. Frenchie watched from across the street, crouched behind a dumpster that reeked of chemical waste. Kimiko was somewhere to his left, invisible in the dark. The driver killed the engine. 2 men in unmarked security gear stepped out, breath misting in the cold. They moved with the efficiency of people who had done this route before, with no chatter, no wasted motion. One punched a code into the bay door. It rolled up with a metallic groan. Frenchie adjusted his night vision monocular. The cargo bed held 3 crates each, marked with Vought International shipping codes. Nothing unusual there. Vought shipped everything from energy drinks to experimental weaponry through channels like this. What made Frenchie's jaw tighten was the 4th container. It is smaller, cylindrical, wrapped in thermal shielding and plastered with biohazard warnings. "That's not on the manifest," he whispered into his radio. Kimiko's response was a single click. She'd seen it too. The guards hauled the crates inside first. Standard procedure: establish the cover load, then deal with the real cargo. Frenchie had watched this operation 3 times over the past 2 weeks. Same truck, same bay, same dance. The boys had been tracking Vaught's supply chain to Sage Grove for months, looking for leverage, looking for proof of what everyone already suspected, the proof that the facility wasn't a hospital, wasn't a rehabilitation center, wasn't anything close to what the press releases claimed. It was a lab. And the people inside weren't patients. The guards returned for the cylinder. One of them carried a handheld scanner, sweeping it over the container's surface. Green light. Clear to transport. They lifted it together, grunting with the effort, despite the size. Heavy then. Dense. Frenchie's mind cataloged possibilities, enriched compounds, compressed volatiles, biological samples in cryogenic suspension. They carried it through the bay door. Frenchie gave Kimiko the signal with 2 short clicks and moved. He crossed the street low and fast, boots silent on cracked asphalt. The bay door was still open, a rectangle of dim, fluorescent lights spilling onto the loading dock. Inside, the guards had their backs turned, maneuvering the cylinder onto a hydraulic dolly. Frenchie slipped past the threshold, pressing himself against a stack of pallets. Kimiko appeared beside him without a sound. She pointed at a surveillance camera in the corner, its red LED blinking. Frenchie pulled a compact jammer from his jacket pocket, aimed, and pressed the button. The LED died. 30 seconds, maybe less, before someone noticed the feed cut. The guard secured the cylinder and started rolling it toward an interior door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Frenchie and Kimiko followed at a distance, using the shadows between storage racks. The air inside smelled like disinfectant and ozone, the kind of sterile sharpness that made Frenchie think of operating rooms and embalming fluid. One of the guards swiped a keycard. The door clicked open. They pushed the dolly through. Frenchie caught the door before it sealed, jamming a folded shim into the latch. Sloppy but necessary. He and Kimiko waited 5 seconds, then entered. The corridor beyond was narrower walls painted in beige. Fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead. The guards were 20 feet ahead, turning a corner. Frenchie moved to follow. The explosion wasn't loud. It was a muffled crump, like someone dropping a bag of cement. But the floor bucked hard enough to knock Frenchie into the wall. The lights flickered. An alarm started wailing, shrill and insistent. Kimiko grabbed his arm, pulled him upright. Ahead, the guards were shouting. One of them was on the ground, clutching his head. The other stared at the cylinder, which had toppled off the dolly and split open along a seam Frenchie hadn't noticed before. Smoke poured out. Not smoke, it is vapor, dense and white, spilling across the floor like liquid. And inside the vapor, something moved. Frenchie's first thought, another soup. Vought had been experimenting on adults at Sage Grove, trying to stabilize Compound 5 for mature subjects. Most of them died screaming. A few survived long enough to become weapons. His second thought that wasn't vapor. It was space tearing itself apart. The air inside the cloud rippled. Not heat distortion, not gas diffusion. The geometry was wrong angles bending in ways that made Frenchie's eyes water. He'd seen explosions before, seen chemicals react in ways that defied intuition. This was different. This was the universe saying no, and then doing it anyway. A hand emerged from the cloud, pale, fingers spread, then a shoulder draped in dark fabric. Then a face, a young, sharp-featured face framed by white hair that caught the fluorescent light like frost. The man stepped out of the impossible space as if walking through a door. He looked around, expression calm, almost bored. His eyes were hidden behind a black blindfold wrapped tight across the bridge of his nose. One of the guards recovered enough to draw his sidearm. "Don't move, hands where I can." He fired. 3 rounds center mass textbook form. The bullets stopped, not ricocheted, not deflected. They simply stopped hanging in the air 3 feet from the man's chest as if someone had pressed pause on reality. The guard stared, fired again. 2 more rounds joined the others suspended mid-flight. The man tilted his head, studying the frozen bullets with what might have been mild curiosity. Then he spoke, voice even and unbothered. "Where is this?" The guard didn't answer. He was already backing away, fumbling for his radio. The man sighed. He gestured just barely, a flick of his wrist, and the guard flew backward, slamming into the wall hard enough to crack plaster. He slumped unconscious. The second guard ran. The man didn't pursue. He stood there, surrounded by vapor and suspended bullets, and looked directly at Frenchie. "You," he said. "Do you know where this is?" Frenchie's mouth was dry. His hand hovered near the pistol tucked into his belt, but some deep survival instinct told him drawing it would be suicide. Whatever this was, it wasn't something you shot at. "America," Frenchie managed. "New Jersey." The man frowned slightly as if the answer disappointed him. "That's not helpful." Behind Frenchie, Kimiko shifted her weight. "Combat ready." The man noticed. His attention flicked to her, then back to Frenchie. "Your friend should relax," he said. "I'm not interested in fighting." "Then what are you interested in?" Frenchie asked. The man considered the question. Around him, the vapor was dissipating, revealing the ruptured cylinder and the scorch marks where reality had bent. The alarm kept shrieking. Somewhere deeper in the facility, boots pounded on tile. "Reinforcements are coming." "Going home," the man said finally. He looked at the broken container, at the walls, at the ceiling, as if taking inventory of his surroundings for the first time. "This isn't where I'm supposed to be." Frenchie heard the boots getting closer. 30 seconds, maybe less. He made a decision. "Then we should leave," he said. "Now." The man's expression didn't change. But after a moment he nodded. "Lead the way." Frenchie didn't wait for second thoughts. He turned and ran, Kimiko flanking him, the stranger following with unsettling calm. They retraced their path through the corridor, past the storage racks, back toward the loading bay. The alarm's wail covered their footsteps, but also masked the sounds of pursuit. Frenchie had no idea how many security personnel Sage Grove kept on site. Well, more than 2, clearly. The bay door was still open. Cold air rushed in, cutting through the chemical smell. Frenchie burst onto the loading dock and immediately saw the problem. 3 more security personnel positioned between them and the street weapons drawn. On the ground now, Frenchie raised his hands. Beside him, Kimiko was worried. And behind him, the stranger stopped walking. "More of them," the man observed, tone unchanged. The lead security officer stepped forward, rifle aimed. "I said on the ground, do it now, or what?" the stranger asked. The officer's trigger discipline held, but his eyes betrayed him. He'd seen the vapor, he'd heard the alarm, and now He was looking at someone who stood there blindfolded, utterly unconcerned by 3 assault rifles pointed at his head. "Last warning," the officer said, voice cracking slightly. The stranger sighed again, a sound that suggested infinite patience running low. He raised one hand, palm out. Nothing visible happened. But all 3 security personnel dropped their weapons simultaneously, clutching their heads as if struck by a migraine. One fell to his knees. Another vomited. The third just stood there trembling. "Go," the stranger said to Frenchie, before more arrived. Frenchie didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed Kimiko's arm and bolted. They hit the street, running, cutting through an alley, taking random turns to break line of sight. Behind them, the alarm kept screaming. They didn't stop until they reached the van. It was a battered panel truck Frenchie had stolen 2 days ago. It parked 4 blocks away in the lot of a closed gas station. He yanked the door open, climbed in, started the engine. Kimiko dove into the passenger seat. The stranger appeared in the side mirror, walking toward them at an unhurried pace. No one was chasing him. The alarms had gone silent. Frenchie leaned out of the window. "Get in." The man complied, climbing into the back without comment. Frenchie floored it, tires screeching on wet pavement. He took 3 turns at random, then merged onto a service road, heading south away from Sage Grove, away from the sirens that were just now starting to converge on the facility. Nobody spoke for 5 minutes. Frenchie focused on driving. Kimiko watched the mirrors. The stranger sat motionless in the back, head tilted, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Finally, Frenchie risked a glance in the rearview mirror. "What the hell are you?" The man's blindfolded face turned toward him. For a moment, Frenchie thought he wouldn't answer. Then, lost. The safe house wasn't safe. It was a gutted machine shop on the industrial edge of Newark, windows boarded, steel door reinforced with a crossbar that took 2 people to lift. Frenchie killed the headlights half a block away and coasted the van into the loading dock. Kimiko was out first, scanning the perimeter while he hauled the entrance open. Their passenger stepped down from the cargo bed, without assistance, hands loose at his sides, posture relaxed in a way that set Frenchie's teeth on edge. Inside, the air smelled like motor oil and rust. A single camping lantern casts weak light across a space filled with stripped equipment and plastic-wrapped pallets. 3 figures waited in the shadows. The largest one moved forward. Broad shoulders, dark skin vest over a tactical shirt. His eyes tracked the newcomer with the precision of someone used to assessing threats. "That him?" Mother's Milk asked. Frenchie nodded. "Where's Butcher?" "Right here." The voice came from the far corner. Footsteps on concrete. A man emerged into the lantern's glow, lean, stubbled jaw coat hanging open over a black shirt stained with something that might have been coffee or blood. His expression was flat and measuring. Billy Butcher studied the stranger for 5 full seconds. His gaze moved from the white hair to the blindfold to the dark coat cataloging details. With the same detachment he might give to a weapon he hadn't decided whether to use or destroy. "Frenchie says you stopped bullets." The stranger's head shifted slightly, tracking Butcher's position despite the blindfold. "They stopped themselves." "That's supposed to be funny." "It's accurate." Butcher's jaw worked. He stepped closer into the light. "You got a name, or should I just call you a science project?" "Gojo." "That's it, just Gojo." "That's enough." Silence stretched. Somewhere in the building's bones, metal creaked. A 4th figure shifted weight near the wall. He's younger, skinnier, wearing a zip-up hoodie and the expression of someone who wanted to be anywhere else. Huey cleared his throat. "Should we, maybe start with why he was in a Vought shipping container?" "Wasn't a shipping container?" Frenchie interjected. He'd pulled the cylindrical device from the van and set it on a workbench. Now he crouched beside it, examining the split seam with a jeweler's focus. "This is a stabilizer prototype for adult test subjects at Sage Grove. Keeps Compound 5 from cooking them from the inside." MM crossed his arms. "And how does that put him in the middle of it?" "It doesn't." Frenchie tapped the scorch marks along the inner lining. This thing failed. Overcharged, maybe. Created a rupture. A what? Frenchie struggled for the word. A tear. In space, not an explosion. An opening that shouldn't exist. Butcher's attention swiveled back to Gojo. You came through an opening. I didn't build it. Didn't ask if you built it. Asked if you came through. Gojo's expression didn't change. Yes. From where? Somewhere else. Butcher took another step. Close enough now that most people would have backed up. Gojo didn't move. Didn't tense. Didn't react at all. Listen, mate. Butcher said, his voice dropping to something almost conversational. I've had a long week. Spent most of it watching Vought ship God knows what into their little torture palace out in the woods. Now you show up walking through walls or dimensions, or whatever the fuck. And my boys here are telling me you're not a soup. So I'm gonna ask you one more time, nice and simple, what are you? Someone who wants to go home. And where's home? Not here. Butcher stared at him. The lantern hissed softly. Outside, a truck rumbled past on the service road. Spoke up. You saying you're from another country? Another world. The silence that followed had weight to it. Huey made a small noise that might have been a laugh or a cough. Frenchie looked up from the device, eyes sharp. Kimiko stood motionless by the entrance, watching everything. Fuck me, Butcher muttered. He turned away, pacing 3 steps, running a hand through his hair. When he faced them again, his expression had shifted into something harder. Right. Multiverse bollocks. Why not, we've got flying Nazis and laser-eyed psychopaths. Sure, let's add dimensional travelers to the list. I didn't travel, Gojo corrected. I was pulled. By what? That. He gestured at the broken stabilizer, or something using similar principles. The technology here is crude, but it achieved a result. Frenchie stood wiping his hands on his jeans. You're saying Vought accidentally opened a portal? I'm saying they destabilized spatial boundaries while trying to force biological compatibility with an external compound. The side effect was dimensional breach. Frenchie blinked. You understand science. I understand the concept. The execution is primitive. Primitive Satoru, repeated. You just insulted Vaught's R&D program. It cost billions of dollars. It's an observation. Butcher laughed bitterly. I like him already. He moved to the workbench, peering at the stabilizer without touching it. So, if this thing ripped you out of wherever you're from, can it put you back? If I had the right components and someone competent to assemble them, and you don't, obviously, so you're stuck. Gojo said nothing. The answer was clear enough. Butcher drummed his fingers on the metal surface, thinking. When he looked up, his smile was sharp and entirely without warmth. Here's how this works. You need tech. You need information. You need people who know how Vought operates off the books. We've got all 3. In exchange for what? A favor. Shoot it. We're going after Sage Grove. Hard. There's data there, the proof of what they're doing to people. We get in, we get out, and you make sure nobody stops us. Gojo's head tilted a fraction. You want me to be your weapon. I want you to be the insurance. Big difference. Not from where I'm standing. Butcher leaned against the bench, arms crossed. Look, I don't give a fuck about what you are or where you're from. What I care about is results. You help us, we help you. Simple transaction. No friendship, no trust, just business. And if I refuse, then you're on your own in a world that'll either try to kill you or turn you into a lab rat when the second Vought figures out you exist. You tell. The words hung in the stale air. Huey shifted uncomfortably. MM's expression was unreadable. Frenchie watched Gojo with the intensity of someone trying to solve an equation that kept changing variables. Gojo stood perfectly still for 10 seconds. 20. When he spoke, his voice carried no emotion whatsoever. Show me the device specifications. I need to know what components are salvageable. Butcher's smile widened. That's a yes. That's conditional cooperation. Don't mistake it for loyalty. Wouldn't dream of it. Frenchie moved to a laptop perched on a stack of crates, fingers already flying across the keyboard. I pulled partial schematics from Sage Grove's network last month. Incomplete, but enough to cross-reference against what we've got here. Gojo approached the screen. He studied the diagrams for perhaps 15 seconds. This won't work. What? The power regulation is wrong. These stabilization fields would collapse under dimensional stress. You'd need quantum-level synchronization, not this fucking approximation. Frenchie's eyes narrowed. You're saying it's impossible to reverse engineer? I'm saying you'll need access to the original research and better components than what's in that wreckage. Sage Grove has both, said quietly. Gojo looked at him. Then that's where I need to go. Butcher clapped his hands once loud in the confined space. There we go. Common ground. We go in together, you get your parts, we get our dirt on Vought. Everyone wins. What about the people inside? Huey's voice was small. The test subjects? Butcher shot him a look. What about them? I mean, if we're breaking in anyway. We're not the Red Cross, Huey. We go and grab what we need, get out. That's it. Gojo's voice cut through. I'm not there to rescue anyone. The bluntness of it made Huey flinch. MM's jaw tightened. But Butcher just nodded as if that was exactly what he'd expected to hear. Good, Butcher said. Means we understand each other. No heroes, no martyrs. Just people trying to get what they need and fuck off before the lights come on. He pushed away from the bench, moving toward a corner where a mini fridge sat next to a card table. He pulled out a beer, cracked it open, didn't offer anyone else one. Frenchie, map out the approach. Check our equipment. Huey, get on the comms and make sure we've got an exit route that doesn't run through a SWAT team. He took a long drink. We move in 3 days. That give you enough time to prep? Frenchie nodded. If we're lucky. We're never lucky. Butcher's gaze drifted back to Gojo. You got any special requirements? Food, water, place to sleep? I'll manage. Course you will. Another drink. One more thing. While you're with us, you don't use whatever the fuck it is you do unless I say so. Last thing we need is Vought tracking some dimensional spike straight to our doorstep. I don't take orders. Not an order, a suggestion, with consequences if you ignore it. The two men stared at each other across the dim space. Neither blinked. Understood, Gojo said eventually. Brilliant. Butcher finished the beer, crushed the can, tossed it toward a corner. It clattered against concrete. Welcome to the team. Try not to get us all killed. He walked toward the exit, pulling his coat tighter. At the threshold, he paused. Oh, and Gojo. If you're lying about any of this, about where you're from, what you want, what you can do, I will definitely find out. And when I do, I won't ask questions. I'll just put a bullet in your head while you sleep. We clear? Gojo's voice was utterly flat. Crystal, Butcher grinned. Good talk. He left. The door clanged shut behind him. In the silence that followed, Huey let out a breath he'd been holding. Is he always like that? That was him being friendly, said. He looked at Gojo. You're really not going to help those people in Sage Grove? No. Why not? Because it's not part of the agreement. MM's expression hardened. That's cold. It's honest. Same thing to you. Gojo didn't answer. He turned back to the schematic on the laptop, studying it with the focus of someone for whom the rest of the room had ceased to exist. Frenchie glanced at then at Kimiko, who shrugged. The tech moved to join Gojo at the screen, keeping a careful arm's length of distance. If you're serious about the quantum synchronization, Frenchie said carefully, there might be another component we need. It's not at Sage Grove. Where? Vaught's secondary facility, about 40 miles south. They store overflow equipment there. Can you access it? With enough time and the right tools, yeah. Gojo nodded once. Add it to the list. Huey watched this exchange with growing unease. He crossed to lowering his voice. Are we really doing this? Bringing him along? Don't see as we got much choice. Murmured back. Butcher's right about one thing: we need an edge. And whatever he is... He nodded toward Gojo. That's an edge. Or a disaster waiting to happen. Could be both. Across the room, Frenchie was explaining something about electromagnetic shielding. Gojo listened without comment, absorbing information like a machine processing data. There was something deeply unsettling about his stillness, the way he occupied space without seeming to need it. Kimiko moved to Huey's side. She made a series of quick hand signs. Huey frowned. You think he's dangerous? She nodded. More than Homelander. She paused, considered. Then she made a gesture that meant different. Yeah, Huey said quietly. That's what I'm afraid of. The hours that followed were tactical. Frenchie pulled up satellite imagery of Sage Grove marking entry points and patrol patterns. Inventoried their weapons, mostly small arms, nothing that would stand up to serious soup opposition. Huey worked his phone, reaching out to contacts who could provide intel on security rotations. Gojo sat apart from them, cross-legged on the concrete floor, utterly motionless. He could have been meditating or sleeping or simply waiting. It was impossible to tell. Around 2 a.m, Frenchie finally shut the laptop and rubbed his eyes. That's all I can do tonight. We'll need daylight to scout the perimeter. Stretched, joints popping. I'll take first watch. Everyone else get some sleep. Huey found a corner with a rolled-up sleeping bag. Frenchie and Kimiko claimed a spot near the exit. One by one, the lantern's glow seemed to dim as exhaustion took over. Only EMM remained fully alert, seated on a crate with a handgun resting on his thigh. His gaze kept drifting to Gojo, who hadn't moved in 3 hours. You gonna sit there all night? Asked. Yes. Don't you sleep? Not when I don't trust my surroundings, grunted. At least we agree on something. Silence settled. Outside the city hummed distant sirens, the rumble of freight trains, the occasional shout from streets that never quite went quiet. Question, said after a while. Gojo's head shifted fractionally. Back at Sage Grove. Those bullets, they really just stopped. Yes. How? Distance. That doesn't explain anything. It explains enough. Shook his head. Butcher's gonna want specifics eventually. Then he'll be disappointed. You always this difficult? Only when people ask questions that don't matter. It matters if we're counting on you. Gojo's voice held no inflection. You're not counting on me. You're using me. There's a difference. And I'm using you. As long as both sides understand that specifics are irrelevant. Considered this. What happens after when you get your parts and your way home? I leave. Just like that. Just like that. And if we're in the middle of something when it happens, that's your problem, not mine. MM's grip tightened on the gun. You really don't give a damn, do you? About your war with Vought. Gojo's tone was matter-of-fact. No. Even knowing what they do, the people they hurt. Every world has organizations that hurt people. Fighting all of them would take lifetimes. I have one objective: go home. Everything else is background noise. That's a hell of a way to look at things. It's the only way that keeps you alive. Had no answer to that. He looked away, jaw working. After a moment, he stood and moved to check the window, peering through a gap in the boards. You're wrong about one thing, he said without turning around. What's that? You said we're using you. Truth is, you're using us just as much. Maybe more. Because without us, you got no intel, no access, and no way to fix that broken machine. So you can sit there and pretend you're above it all. But at the end of the day, you need us. And that means you got skin in this game, whether you like it or not. Gojo said nothing. Glanced back. Yeah, that's what I thought. He returned to his crate. The conversation was over. Hours passed. The city outside began its slow transition toward dawn. And in the darkness of the gutted machine shop, 7 people waited for the violence they all knew was coming. None of them trusted each other. All of them needed this to work. And somewhere in the space between those two facts, a deal had been struck that would break things neither side could predict. The perimeter fence ran for half a mile through scrub pine and dead grass. 12 feet high chain link topped with razor wire cameras every 30 yards. Beyond it, the facility squatted low in brutal concrete slabs and narrow windows architecture designed to keep things in rather than welcome anyone inside. A sign near the main gate read, Sage Grove Center, in faded letters. Beneath it, smaller text, authorized personnel only. Butcher crouched in the tree-lined binoculars pressed to his face. Morning light cut through the branches at sharp angles. Beside him, MM scanned the patrol routes with a handheld tablet mapping guard rotations against satellite imagery pulled from 3 weeks of surveillance. 2-man teams, MM muttered. Overlapping coverage on the east wing. That's where they're keeping the high-risk cases, or where the real nasty shit happens, Butcher said. He lowered the binoculars. Frenchie, you got the thermal. 20 feet to their left, Frenchie adjusted a compact imaging scope mounted on a tripod. The screen showed heat signatures blooming inside the building. Bodies moving through corridors clustered in what looked like holding cells. 37 individuals in containment, he reported. Most stationary, 3 moving erratically. He zoomed in on one signature pacing a tight circle. That one hasn't stopped for 6 hours. Huey shifted his weight, trying to find a position that didn't involve kneeling on exposed roots. Are we sure this is recon and not like an actual break-in? Because it feels like we're pretty close. We're close enough to see, Butcher replied. Not close enough to get caught. Yet, MM added. Gojo stood apart from the group, leaning against a tree with his arms crossed. He hadn't contributed to the planning, hadn't asked questions. For the past 40 minutes, he'd simply observed head-angled, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Butcher glanced at him. You picking up anything useful or just enjoying the view? The building has 3 sub-levels, Gojo said without preamble. The power grid routes through the northwest corner. There's a secondary cooling system for biological containment. And someone inside is screaming. Frenchie's hands froze on the scope. You can hear that from here. Can't you? No, we're 300 yards out. Gojo shrugged. Then you're missing context. M exchanged a look with Butcher. The leader's expression remained flat, but something tightened around his eyes, calculation mixing with the faintest edge of unease. Right, Butcher said slowly. Good to know we brought a human surveillance satellite. Before anyone could respond, Kimiko's hand shot up. She made a series of rapid signs, Huey translated. Vehicle approaching, from the south access road. Butcher swung the binoculars around. A black SUV rolled through the gate, waved past by security without inspection. Tinted windows, Vought logo on the door panel. It parked near the main entrance. 2 figures emerged. The first was a woman in tactical gear. Blonde hair, pulled tight stance, radiating authority. Stormfront. Even from this distance, her presence carried weight, the kind that made people step aside or disappear entirely. The second figure wore white and gold. Starlight. She moved differently, stiffer, like someone playing a role they hadn't quite mastered yet. Frenchie cursed under his breath in French. That's a problem, MM said. That's confirmation, Butcher corrected. He watched Stormfront gesture toward the east wing. Starlight followed, shoulders tight. They're here for damage control. Something's already gone sideways. Or they're prepping for the next phase, Frenchie suggested. He pulled up files on his laptop, intercepted emails, coded purchase orders, encrypted manifests. Sage Grove's been requesting additional sedatives, restraint equipment, body bags. Body bags? Huey's voice cracked slightly. They're cleaning house, MM said. Getting rid of evidence before someone asks the wrong questions. Gojo's attention remained fixed on the building. The person screaming stopped. The words dropped into the conversation like stones into still water. Nobody moved. Stopped how? Huey asked. Just stopped. Butcher lowered the binoculars. Frenchie, pull up that thermal again. The tech complied, fingers flying. The screen refreshed. He zoomed in on the section where the erratic signature had been pacing. Empty. Could have been moved, MM offered. Could have been silenced, Butcher countered. Frenchie's jaw clenched. The other two are still active, but their patterns changed. They're both in the same cell now. Consolidation, MM said. Standard protocol before transport or disposal. The group fell into tense planning. Butcher sketched entry points in the dirt with a stick. Frenchie cross-referenced blueprints against the thermal data. MM calculated timelines. Huey kept watch on the facility tracking guards and noting shift changes. Gojo remained motionless, a fixed point, while everything else shifted around him. Hours bled past. The sun climbed higher, harsh and indifferent. Around noon, movement caught Huey's attention, not at the facility, but behind them, deeper in the woods. He turned, squinting through the dappled shadows. A figure stumbled between trees. Human-shaped, but wrong. Skin too pale, movements jerky and uncoordinated. Hospital scrubs hung in tatters. No shoes. Feet bleeding from the underbrush. Guys. Butcher followed his gaze. Fuck. The escaped test subject lurched forward, oblivious to their presence. His eyes were unfocused, pupils blown wide. When he opened his mouth, no sound emerged, just a wet rasp, like lungs filled with something thicker than air. Sage Grove runaway, MM said quietly. Must have gotten out during a transfer. The subject's head snapped toward them. Too fast. Vertebrae cracked audibly. Recognition flickered across his ruined features, followed immediately by panic. He bolted, or tried to. His body convulsed mid-step. Muscles spasmed. Bones shifted beneath skin with nauseating fluidity. Compound phi rejection in real-time cells, tearing themselves apart, attempting to stabilize powers they couldn't contain. Christ, Huey whispered. The subject collapsed, limbs contorting. Blood leaked from his nose, ears, eyes. He tried to crawl. Failed. Tried again. Butcher reached for his sidearm. Can't let him make noise. Guards'll hear. Wait, MM said, hand on his arm. If we shoot, they'll definitely hear. Then what's your suggestion? Before MM could answer, Gojo moved. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, no hurry, no hesitation. The subject looked up, mouth working soundlessly, one hand stretching toward him in something that might have been a plea for help or a warning to stay back. Gojo crouched just out of reach. This won't take long. The subject's eyes rolled back. His body went rigid. Convulsions stopped. Breathing ceased. He slumped forward, utterly limp. Silence reclaimed the woods. Frenchie stared. What did you do? Accelerated the inevitable, Gojo said. He stood brushing dirt from his coat. His nervous system was already failing. I just removed the delay. You killed him. He was dead the moment Vought injected him. I just made it quieter. Huey looked like he might be sick. MM's expression had gone carefully blank. Butcher studied Gojo with renewed intensity, as if seeing him for the first time. No contact, Suma, Butcher said slowly. You didn't touch him. Didn't need to. How? Gojo turned back toward the facility. Does it matter? Yeah, actually, it does. Why? Butcher stepped closer. Because I need to know what you are. Not where you're from. Not what you want. What you are. Gojo's blindfolded face angled toward him. Something your world doesn't have words for. Try me. I manipulate space, distance, the fundamental structure of physical interaction. His voice carried no inflection, delivering information the way someone might recite a grocery list. What you call superpowers are biological modifications. What I do is architectural. I change the rules locally. Frenchie's breath caught. Quantum manipulation. Simpler than that, and more absolute. That's not simple, MM said. That's terrifying. Only if you're on the receiving end. Butcher's smile was sharp and utterly devoid of warmth. And what happens if we end up on the receiving end? You won't. How can you be sure? Because you're useful. Gojo's tone remained flat, factual. The moment you stop being useful, I'll leave. Not fight, not threaten, just leave. So your safety depends entirely on whether you can get me what I need before I lose patience. The honesty of it was somehow worse than a threat. Huey looked to MM, who looked to Butcher. None of them had an answer. Frenchie broke the tension by returning to his laptop. We need to move on this. Stormfront being here means the window's closing. If they're purging evidence, anything we need will be gone by tomorrow. Tonight, then, Butcher decided. We go in tonight. That's not enough time for proper prep, MM protested. It's the time we've got. Frenchie finalized the entry route. MM checked the equipment. Huey confirmed the backup vehicles. His gaze shifted to Gojo. And you make sure whatever you just did to that poor bastard, you can do to anyone who gets in our way. Within reason, Gojo amended. Reason's negotiable. Not to me. Butcher's jaw worked. We're gonna have problems, you and me. Probably. Looking forward to it. The group dispersed to their tasks, leaving the body where it lay. Natural causes, as far as anyone would determine. Just another failed experiment in a forest full of them. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Frenchie found himself watching Gojo more than the facility. The man hadn't moved in 20 minutes, hadn't checked his surroundings, didn't seem concerned about the armed guards, the surveillance, the risk of discovery. You're not worried, Frenchie said. It wasn't a question. Should I be? Most people would be. We're about to break into a black site run by a corporation that murders witnesses. I'm not most people. No. Frenchie hesitated. That's what worries me. Gojo's head tilted slightly. You think I'll turn on you? I think you won't need to. You'll just walk away, and we'll be left with the consequences. That's accurate. Doesn't that bother you? Why would it? Frenchie had no answer. He returned to his data cross-referencing thermal signatures against architectural plans, building a mental map of corridors and choke points. But part of his attention remained on Gojo. The inhuman stillness, the complete absence of nervous energy. Hours later, as dusk bled into darkness, Butcher gathered them for final instructions. The plan was simple: bypass. The east wing hit the data center. Extract hard drives and samples exfiltrate before Stormfront realized anything was missing. And if she does realize, Huey asked. Then we improvise, Butcher said. That's not a plan. It's the only plan that survives contact with reality. He looked at each of them in turn. Last chance to back out. After tonight, there's no going quiet again. Nobody moved. Good. We breach in 30 minutes. The group prepped and practiced rhythm, checking weapons, testing comms, synchronizing watches. Gojo contributed nothing to the preparations. He simply stood at the tree line, facing the facility, as if he could see through concrete and steel to whatever waited inside. MM approached, voice low. Question. Gojo acknowledged him with a fractional nod. If things go bad, if Stormfront corners us or alarms bring the whole security force down, what do we do? Run. And if we can't, then you'll find out what happens when someone tries to stop me. He paused. It won't be educational. It'll just be over. MM absorbed this. You really don't care, do you, about any of this? The people inside, what Vaught's doing, what it means. I care about going home. Everything else is background noise. Even us, especially you. MM walked away without another word. When he rejoined the group, Butcher caught his expression and raised an eyebrow. MM just shook his head. The minutes ticked down. Equipment checked, routes confirmed, contingencies mapped. Everything that could be prepared had been. Butcher pulled the slide on his pistol, chambering around. Right then. Let's go see what fresh hell Vaught's cooked up this time. They moved toward the fence line, shadows merging with shadows, disappearing into the manufactured dark between security lights. Behind them, the woods reclaimed the space they'd occupied, indifferent to whether they'd return. And in the facility ahead, something waited, not knowing it was waiting, not knowing what was coming. But it would learn. Everyone did eventually. The surveillance room smelled like stale coffee and electrical burn. 6 monitors lined the wall, cycling through camera feeds from every corner of Sage Grove. Frenchie crouched beneath the desk, fingers flying across a portable terminal while splicing into the security network. Above him, grainy footage showed empty corridors, locked wards guards making their rounds with the mechanical precision of people who'd done this 1,000 times. Huey kept watch at the entrance, one hand on the door frame, ready to signal if anyone approached. Kimiko stood behind Frenchie, tracking each monitor for patterns they'd need to avoid. The rest of the team had split off, covering the east stairwell, Butcher scouting the data center 2 floors down. Gojo leaned against the far wall, observing everything and contributing nothing. Frenchie's terminal beeped. Green text scrolled across the black screen. Got it. Surveillance is looped. We have maybe 10 minutes before someone notices the timestamps don't match. Then we move fast, Huey whispered. A door slammed somewhere deeper in the compound. Footsteps echoed through ventilation shafts. Someone shouted coordinates. Standard patrol chatter, nothing urgent. Frenchie pulled up the architectural overlay, highlighting 3 locations in red. These are the high-risk containment cells. Subjects who haven't stabilized. If we're pulling samples, these are the ones Vought will purge first. How many? Huey asked. 14. Maybe 16 if they moved someone since the last manifest update. On the monitor, a man in a lab coat hurried past one of the cameras, carrying a metal case stamped with biohazard warnings. He disappeared around a corner. Another figure followed security, judging by the tactical vest and sidearm. Kimiko signed rapidly. She says the guards are nervous, Huey translated. More than usual. Frenchie zoomed in on one of the feeds. They upgraded the protocols. Look, biometric scanners at every checkpoint now. Thermal sensors in the corridors. They're hunting for something. Us? Huey's voice cracked slightly. Maybe. Or maybe they already lost something and don't want to admit it. The terminal chirped. New data streamed in internal emails flagged as priority. Frenchie scanned them, jaw tightening with each line. What? Huey pressed. Containment failures. 3 in the last 72 hours. 1 subject terminated. 2 unaccounted for. Unaccounted for meaning what? Meaning they don't know if the bodies are still in the facility or if something walked out. Huey paled. We need to tell Butcher. Already on it. Frenchie keyed the comms. Butcher, we've got a situation. Sage Grove's bleeding test subjects. Security's tighter than the recon suggested. Static crackled. Butcher's voice came through low and clipped. How tight? Biometrics. Thermal tracking. They're not just guarding the facility, they're hunting inside it. A pause. Can you bypass? For a while. But if someone trips an alarm, the whole place locks down. Then don't trip any alarms. The line went dead. Frenchie cursed in French. He looked at Gojo, who hadn't moved since they'd entered the room. You getting any of this? Someone's been screaming for the last 6 minutes, Gojo said. Same voice. Northeast quadrant, sublevel 2. Frenchie checked the monitors. Nothing on that feed, just an empty corridor outside a reinforced door marked Isolation Ward B. I don't see anyone. You're not listening for it, Huey swallowed. Should we? I mean, if someone's in trouble, we're not here for rescue missions. Frenchie cut him off, but his fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating. Gojo pushed off the wall. They stopped. What? The screaming stopped. On the monitor, the isolation ward door opened. A man stumbled out, hospital scrubs restraints hanging loose from one wrist. He made it 3 steps before collapsing. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and spreading fast. Jesus Christ, Huey breathed. The man didn't get up. Didn't move. Within 30 seconds, 2 guards appeared, dragging the body back into the ward. The door sealed. The corridor returned to empty fluorescent calm. Frenchie's hands trembled on the keys. They just let him bleed out. Standard protocol, Gojo observed. Failed experiment. Remove evidence. Continue operations. That's a person. That was a liability. Huey spun on him. How can you just... Kimiko grabbed his arm, shaking her head. Not now. Not the fight worth having. Frenchie forced himself to focus. We need those files. Whatever Vaught's doing here, it's worse than we thought. He pulled up a schematic of the lower levels. Data archive is here. If we can reach it without triggering. Alarms shrieked. All 6 monitors flashed red. Doors throughout the facility began slamming shut, magnetic locks engaging with heavy metallic thuds. Automated announcements blared from ceiling speakers. Containment breach. Lockdown protocol initiated. All personnel report to designated safe zones. That's not us, Frenchie said, checking his terminal. We didn't trigger anything. Then who did? Huey demanded. On the monitors, chaos erupted. Guards scrambled through corridors, weapons drawn. Lab staff fled in the opposite direction, abandoning equipment. And in the northeast quadrant, the isolation ward, something had torn the reinforced door off its hinges. A figure emerged. Female. Young. Moving with the jerky unpredictability of someone whose nervous system was rewiring itself in real time. Cindy. Frenchie recognized her from the files, one of the few subjects who'd survived Compound 5 integration past the first week. She walked into the corridor. A guard raised his rifle. She looked at him. The guard's weapon crumpled like aluminum foil. His bones followed. He dropped, screaming body collapsing inward as if crushed by invisible hands. Cindy kept walking. Telekinesis, Frenchie whispered. Uncontrolled, she's not targeting, she's just reacting. Another guard tried to flank her. Same result. Crushed. Discarded. Cindy didn't even break stride. She reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Cell doors lined the walls. She stared at them. Every lock shattered simultaneously. 30 doors swung open. People stumbled out. Test subjects. Failed experiments. Some barely human anymore. Skin-discolored limbs elongated, eyes too bright or too dark or entirely absent. They poured into the corridors like water from a broken dam, directionless, panicked, dangerous. We need to go. MM's voice crackled over the comms. Now, this whole place is about to... Gunfire erupted on the feed. Guards opening fire on anything that moved. Test subjects scattering some fighting back with whatever powers they'd been cursed with. One man exhaled flame. Another's touch corroded metal. A woman phased through a wall and disappeared. Frenchie grabbed his equipment, stuffing it into his pack. Exit route. Huey checked the schematic. East stairwell is blocked. West is... Oh God, that's where most of the subjects are headed. Then we go through them. Butcher's voice cut in. Regroup at the data center. We didn't come this far to leave empty-handed. Butcher, it's a massacre out there, which is why Vought will be too busy to notice us. Move. The team abandoned the surveillance room, entering corridors that had transformed into war zones. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red. The automated announcements kept repeating mechanical and indifferent. Remain in safe zones. Security personnel authorized to use lethal force. They moved as a unit, Kimiko on Point Huey, covering the rear Frenchie, navigating via the map burned into his memory. Gojo walked in the center of the formation pace, unhurried. A test subject rounded the corner ahead, male mid-30s skin, crackling with electrical discharge. He saw them. Charged. Gojo raised one hand. The man stopped mid-sprint, suspended as if he'd run into an invisible wall. Electricity arced across his body, searching for a target it couldn't reach. He strained muscles, bunching veins standing out against his neck. Nothing happened. Gojo lowered his hand. The man dropped unconscious before he hit the ground. The team didn't slow. They stepped over the body and kept moving. What did you do to him? Huey asked. Removed his ability to maintain forward momentum, Gojo replied. His brain interpreted it as sudden deceleration. Neural shock. He'll wake up in a few hours. Or he won't, Frenchie muttered. Irrelevant. They reached the data center. Butcher was already inside MMM, covering the entrance. Rows of server racks hummed LEDs, blinking in rhythmic patterns. Butcher held a hard drive in one hand, cables trailing from its connectors. Got the primary archive, he said. Frenchie, I need you to crack the encryption before we move. Frenchie crossed to the nearest terminal, plugging in his portable deck. This'll take at least 5 minutes. Then you've got 3. Outside, the sounds of conflict intensified. Screams, gunfire, the wet crunch of bodies hitting walls at impossible speeds. Sage Grove was tearing itself apart, each second adding to the chaos. Peered through the doorway. We've got movement. Multiple targets coming this way. Can you hold them? Butcher asked. Depends on what they are. 3 figures appeared at the end of the corridor. Test subjects, judging by the hospital scrubs and the way they moved too fast, too coordinated, too hungry. One of them had claws. Another's skin looked like volcanic glass, sharp edges catching the light. Kimiko stepped forward. Raised his weapon. Gojo walked past both of them. The subjects charged. Gojo didn't break stride. At the moment they should have collided, they simply didn't. The lead subject crashed into nothing momentum, arrested so abruptly he flipped forward, slamming face first into concrete. The second veered left, trying to flank, and found herself pressed flat against the wall by invisible force ribs, audibly cracking. The third hesitated, survival instinct finally kicking in. Gojo gestured. The third subject flew backward, sliding across the floor until he hit the far wall and stayed there pinned. Route secured, Gojo said. He returned to his position in the data center as if nothing had happened. Frenchie stared at his screen, trying to focus on the decryption, while his peripheral vision kept tracking Gojo. The ease of it. The complete absence of effort or concern. Almost there, he managed. 30 seconds. Butcher checked his watch. We've got company topside. Stormfront just landed. How do you know? Because half the guards just stopped firing and started forming a perimeter. That's her MO. Show up, take command. Make sure Vaught's interests are protected. The terminal beeped. Green text, decryption complete. Got it, Frenchie said. Copying now. Files streamed onto the portable drive. Test subject profiles, compound V formulations, authorization memos, video logs. Everything Vought had done in this compound cataloged and archived for future reference or plausible deniability. The drive filled. Frenchie ejected it, slipping it into his jacket. We're done. Then we leave, Butcher said. Kimiko, scout the exit. Cover our 6. Huey, an explosion shook the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. The emergency lighting flickered. What the hell was that? Demanded. Frenchie pulled up the facility map on his portable. A section of the east wing had gone dark. Structural failure. Or someone with enough power to punch through reinforced walls. Cindy, Huey guessed. Or someone worse. They abandoned the data center, navigating a facility that no longer resembled the sterile research compound they'd infiltrated. Fire suppression systems sprayed chemical foam. Ceiling panels hung loose. Blood stains marked the floors. Bodies, guards, staff, test subjects lay where they'd fallen, some still twitching. Kimiko led them through a maintenance corridor that dumped into a loading bay. The same one they'd entered through. The door was still open. Beyond it, freedom. A figure blocked their path, lamplighter. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the night, a lighter in one hand. His other hand trembled. Frenchie, he said. I figured you'd be here. The tech froze. Get out of the way. Can't do that. Lamplighter's thumb hovered over the lighter's wheel. Stormfront gave orders. No one leaves with the data. You gonna burn us? If I have to. Butcher raised his pistol. Try it, and I'll put a bullet in your brain before the first spark catches. Lamplighter's laugh was hollow. You think I care? You think any of this matters? He gestured at the facility behind them. I helped build this place. I brought them test subjects. Kids, Frenchie. Kids who didn't know what they were signing up for. I know what you did, Frenchie said quietly. Then you know I can't let you walk out of here. The lighter sparked. Flame blossomed. Stormfront's orders. Gojo moved. He crossed the distance in 2 steps, plucked the lighter from Lamplighter's hand, and crushed it to scrap metal. The flame died. Lamplighter stared at his empty palm. "What?" "You're in the way," Gojo said. He placed one hand on Lamplighter's shoulder. The man's eyes rolled back. He crumpled unconscious. The team stepped over him and exited into the night. Behind them, Sage Grove burned. Not from Lamplighter's lighter, from the chaos inside systems, failing containment protocols, collapsing everything Vought had built, turning against itself. They didn't look back. They ran. Fire suppression foam rained from ceiling jets, coating everything in white slick that made traction a gamble. The team hit the loading bay at a dead sprint boots, skidding on treated concrete while alarms wailed from speakers mounted too high to disable. Behind them, Sage Grove was eating itself, walls buckling under telekinetic pressure, glass shattering in cascades that sounded like applause voices, screaming in frequencies that shouldn't come from human throats. Shouldered through the bay's service entrance, first weapon up, sweeping angles. Clear. He waved the others forward. Kimiko vaulted a toppled shipping container, landed cat-silent despite the chaos. Huey came next, clutching the hard drive against his chest like a talisman. Frenchie brought up the rear laptop, still open in one hand, tracking thermal signatures that were fragmenting across his display as the building's power grid failed in sections. Butcher grabbed MM's shoulder. "Where's the van?" "North lot, 200 meters. Then we run north." They bolted into open air. Night had settled, fully moonless and cold. Sodium lights mounted on poles cast everything in sickly orange. The parking lot stretched ahead, cracked asphalt, employee vehicles, abandoned mid-shift when the lockdown hit a chain-link fence separating them from the access road beyond. Explosions thudded inside the compound. Not fire. Kinetic force bodies thrown against reinforced barriers, metal tearing foundations shifting. A section of the east wing's roof peeled upward, debris spiraling into the sky before gravity reclaimed it. Dust bloomed. Searchlights mounted on guard towers swept erratically, operators panicking or dead or fleeing. "Jesus," Huey whispered. "Keep moving," MM snapped. Gojo walked beside them, pace steady while everyone else ran. His presence felt wrong in the chaos, too calm, too centered, like a fixed point while reality warped around him. Frenchie glanced back, saw the man's head turn fractionally toward the compound. "Something's coming," Gojo said. "What?" The fence exploded outward. Chain link wrapped around itself, posts yanked from concrete foundations by force applied from nowhere visible. A figure stepped through the gap. Cindy. She looked worse than the surveillance footage suggested. Hospital scrubs shredded, bare feet bleeding, skin mottled with chemical burns from failed sedatives. Her eyes tracked movement without focus, pupils dilated so wide the irises had vanished. When she breathed, the air around her rippled. Behind her, others emerged, 7, 8, maybe more. Test subjects who'd been locked in containment wards, with restraints and sedatives and biometric locks. All of it useless now. All of it gone. One man's skin had turned translucent organs, visible beneath membranes that pulsed with bioluminescence. A woman trailed smoke from her shoulders, heat shimmered distorting her outline. Something that might have been human once crawled on limbs bent at angles that defied skeletal structure. They weren't attacking. They were fleeing, and Cindy was leading them. Raised his weapon. "Butcher, don't!" Butcher's hand pushed the barrel down. "We're not here for them. They're heading straight for the access road. If they reach civilian areas, not our problem." Frenchie's terminal beeped. He stared at the screen, blood draining from his face. "We have a bigger problem." "Spit it out." "Internal memo, time-stamped 4 minutes ago. Vought activated clean sweep protocol." MM's jaw clenched. "What does that mean?" "It means they're not containing the breach." Frenchie's voice shook. "They're erasing it. All of it. The building, the subjects, anyone still inside." "How?" "I don't know. incendiary structural collapse. They've got fail-safes for exactly this scenario when the facility becomes a liability instead of an asset. Huey looked at the compound. There are still people in there. Staff, guards, people who don't deserve, and we can't save them, Butcher cut in. So we take what we got and we leave. That's it, Huey's voice cracked. We just let them die. We came for data. We have data. Anything else is mission creep. Fuck mission creep. Huey stepped toward Butcher's chest, heaving. These are people. Cindy's head snapped toward them. The argument had drawn her attention. Her gaze fixed on Huey, on the hard drive in his hands, on something she recognized or wanted or feared. She raised one hand. Gojo intercepted. He didn't shout a warning, didn't gesture dramatically. He simply stepped between Cindy and Huey, and the telekinetic wave that should have crushed bone hit nothing instead, or rather hit distance that refused to compress. The force dispersed outward away from its intended target, blowing dust in radial patterns across the parking lot. Cindy stared, tried again, same result. Her face twisted. Frustration, confusion, rage. She pulled harder, drawing on reserves of power that were burning through her nervous system faster than biology could compensate. The asphalt beneath her cracked. Vehicles nearby shuddered, glass fracturing. Gojo remained unmoved. Stop, he said. Cindy screamed. No words, just sound. The other subjects scattered, fleeing her tantrum. One of them, the translucent man, stumbled too close. Cindy lashed out reflexively. His chest cavity imploded. He dropped without a sound, organs compressed to pulp. The woman trailing smoke lunged at Cindy, trying to restrain her, or kill her, or both. Flames erupted. Skin blackened. Both of them went down thrashing. We need to move, MM said. Now! They ran. Gojo walked. Cindy stayed where she was, kneeling beside the bodies she had created, shaking uncontrollably. The team reached the van. MM took the wheel. Kimiko rode shotgun. The rest piled into the back. Engine roared to life. Tires spun, caught, propelled them toward the access road. Through the rear window, Sage Grove looked like a war zone. More subjects spilled from breaches in the perimeter. Some fought each other. Some just ran directionless, panicked. Guards tried to establish containment lines and failed. Vehicles arrived, black SUVs with Vought logos, tactical teams deploying with heavy weaponry. They're bringing in the real firepower, Frenchie said, watching through binoculars. Military grade. To kill their own experiments, Huey asked. To erase mistakes. The van hit the main road, accelerating hard. MM took corners, tight headlights off, navigating by memory and moonlight. 5 miles out, they heard the first detonation. Not an explosion. A controlled implosion. Sage Grove's central wing folded inward, collapsing with surgical precision. Dust clouds rose. Secondary charges followed, systematic, methodical, erasing the compound piece by piece. Frenchie kept watching until the horizon swallowed the light. When he turned around, his hands were shaking. They're burying everyone, he said. Staff subjects' evidence, all of it. Then we make sure it wasn't for nothing, Butcher replied. He tapped the hard drive in Huey's lap. This gets out. Every file, every video, every memo approving those experiments. And then what? MM asked from the driver's seat. Vought spins it, calls it enemy propaganda, blames terrorists. They've got lawyers who specialize in making atrocities disappear. Then we hit them harder, with what we just burned, our best source. Butcher leaned back, jaw working. We improvise. That's not a plan. It's the only plan that survives what we just saw. The van fell into tense quiet. Outside, highways unfolded, empty lanes, distant truck lights, the machinery of normal life, continuing oblivious. Somewhere behind them, people were dying. Somewhere ahead, Vought was already constructing the narrative that would explain it all away. Gojo sat in the corner, arms crossed, expression unreadable behind the blindfold. He'd been silent since leaving the compound. Frenchie studied him, trying to parse what he'd just witnessed. You stopped her, Frenchie said quietly. Cindy, you could have ended it. I stopped her from killing you, Gojo corrected. That's different. Why not finish it? She was right there. Because she wasn't my problem. She killed 2 people in front of you. She killed 2 experiments who were already dead. Vought made sure of that when they injected them. Huey's voice was raw. So you just don't care at all. Gojo's head shifted toward him. I care about going home. I told you that from the beginning. But you stopped her from hurting us. That means you care about something. It means you're still useful. Once you stop being useful, I stop intervening. The bluntness landed like a physical blow. Huey looked away, jaw tight. And glanced in the rearview mirror. How long we got on that usefulness clock depends on how quickly you can get me what I need. And what happens if we can't, then I find another way. Or I don't. Either way, it stops being your concern. Butcher laughed short, bitter. At least you're honest. Would you prefer I lie? Wouldn't matter. Liars are easier to work with. They pretend to give a shit. Gojo said nothing. The silence stretched. Frenchie opened his laptop, pulling up the files they'd extracted. Data streamed across the screen, personnel records, experiment logs, chemical formulations, authorization chains. Months of horror compressed into gigabytes. His cursor hovered over a folder labeled Subject Termination Protocols. He clicked. Video files. Hundreds of them. Don't, MM said. I need to know. No, you don't. Frenchie opened one anyway. Grainy footage. A containment cell. A man strapped to a medical table. Doctors in protective gear administering injections. The man convulsing, screaming, flesh splitting as bone structure reorganized beneath skin. 3 minutes of agony, then stillness. The doctors made notes, left the body, moved to the next cell. Frenchie closed the file, leaned back, stared at nothing. They did this hundreds of times, he whispered. Hundreds. And now we've got proof, Butcher said. Proof doesn't bring them back. No, but it makes sure Vought bleeds for it. The van continued south, eating miles, putting distance between them and the atrocity they'd barely escaped. By the time they reached the secondary safe house, a storage unit on the industrial outskirts of Newark Dawn was threatening the eastern horizon. Killed the engine. Nobody moved for a long moment. Exhaustion and adrenaline fought for dominance. Finally, Kimiko signed something. She says we should rest, Huey translated. Regroup. Figure out next steps. Next steps are simple, Butcher said. We leak this data, all of it. Every outlet we can reach. Make it impossible for Vought to contain. They'll come after us, pointed out. They're already coming after us. Now we just make it worth it. Frenchie shook his head. This isn't exposure anymore. This is damage control. What's that supposed to mean? It means we crossed a line tonight. We didn't just witness a disaster. We were part of the conditions that caused it. If we'd never broken in, if we'd never triggered their security protocols, then Sage Grove keeps running, Butcher interrupted. Keeps torturing people. Keeps producing monsters for Vought to weaponize. We didn't create this. We just forced them to show their hand. By getting people killed. They got themselves killed the moment they signed up to work for Vought. Frenchie's hands curled into fists. You don't actually believe that. I believe in results. And the result is we have enough data to cripple their super soldier program. Everything else is noise. Stepped between them. Both of you shut up. We're tired. We're pissed. And arguing about guilt won't change what happened. He looked at each of them in turn. We rest. We catalog the data. We decide on distribution strategy. In that order. Butcher held Frenchie's gaze for another moment, then turned away. Fine. 4 hours. Then we move. They filed out of the van. The storage unit smelled like motor oil and concrete dust. Sleeping bags in one corner. MREs stacked in another. A portable generator humming quietly. Home for now. Gojo remained in the van, seated in the back, posture relaxed. Frenchie paused at the door. You coming? No. You need rest too. I don't rest in places I don't trust. You don't trust anywhere. Exactly. Frenchie studied him. Back there. When you stopped Cindy. For a second I thought, don't. Thought what? Whatever you were about to say. Don't. I'm not what you want me to be. I'm not a hero. I'm not your insurance policy. I'm a stranded traveler using you to get home. The moment that changes this arrangement ends. And if we need you before that moment, then you'd better hope I still need you. Frenchie nodded slowly. Yeah, that's what I thought. He left. The van door slammed. Gojo sat alone in the dark, listening to the team settle into uneasy sleep, listening to the city wake beyond the storage unit's walls. Somewhere to the north, Sage Grove finished collapsing. Somewhere in Vought Tower, executives were already drafting press releases about tragic industrial accidents and rogue terrorists. Somewhere in between, the truth was bleeding out faster than anyone could cauterize it. And in the back of a stolen van, a man who didn't belong to this world waited for the people who'd promised to help him leave it. The clock was ticking. Everyone could feel it. The air tasted like ozone and ash. Stormfront descended from cloud cover electrical discharge, crackling across her suit in patterns that followed no natural law. She touched down 30 meters from where the boys had regrouped near the tree line, close enough to establish dominance, far enough to assess threats. Her gaze swept the scene. Burning structures, bodies scattered across what had been a secure perimeter. A hole torn in reality itself, metaphorically speaking. Though she'd seen enough compound V reactions to know metaphors sometimes became literal. Status, she said into her earpiece. A voice responded, clinical and distant. Containment failure confirmed. Asset reclamation protocol active. Cleanup teams ETA 6 minutes. Survivors unclear. Thermal readings compromised. Stormfront's attention shifted to the cluster of figures attempting to fade into the wood line. Not staff. Not authorized personnel. She recognized the tactical posture, people who knew how to move under fire, how to extract from hostile environments. One of them stood differently. White hair, dark clothing posture, suggesting either supreme confidence or complete indifference. She couldn't tell which. Lamplighter, she called. The man emerged from the facility's main entrance, soot-stained and shaking. He'd been inside when it started. She could smell the smoke on him from here. Ma'am, what happened? System malfunction. The words came too quickly. Cooling failure in Ward 3. Cascade effect. I tried to contain it, but... Spare me the engineering report. Who are they? She gestured toward the tree line. Lamplighter squinted. Looters maybe heard the chaos, thought they could grab equipment before security responded. Armed looters. It's Jersey. Stormfront studied him. His pulse elevated. Sweat despite the cold. Lying, obviously. But lying about what and why required investigation she didn't have time for. The priority was containment, not interrogation. Get inside. Help the cleanup teams catalog what can be salvaged. Yes, ma'am. He disappeared back into the smoke. Stormfront turned her full attention to the tree line. Electricity arced between her fingers as she advanced. The figures scattered except one. The man with white hair didn't move. Didn't even shift weight. She'd expected panic flight aggression. This was none of those. You're trespassing on private property, she said, voice carrying across the distance. No response. I can make this easy or I can make it memorable. Your choice. The man's head angled slightly, as if considering her offer with genuine curiosity. When he spoke, his voice carried no accent she could place. You think those are the only options? They're the only ones you get. She thrust her palm forward. Lightning lanced across the space between them, enough voltage to stop a hard enough amperage to carbonize flesh. It should have connected. Should have ended this in one clean strike. It didn't. The discharge hit something invisible and dispersed, not reflected, not absorbed, simply scattered outward, like water against glass. The grass around him ignited, where the excess energy grounded. He remained untouched. Stormfront's eyes narrowed. She adjusted her stance, recalculating. Compound 5 gave people all kinds of resistances. Heat, kinetic force, radiation. Electricity wasn't uncommon. But the way the current had dispersed suggested something more sophisticated than simple insulation. Interesting, she said. Not really. She tried again, this time with more focus, concentrated, discharge, sustained pressure. The result was identical. Energy refracted around him, seeking any path except the one that would make contact. "What are you?" she asked. "Leaving." The man turned away, actually turned his back on her, and walked toward the tree line where his companions waited. The audacity of it made her fingers twitch. She could follow, press the engagement. But something in his movement pattern, the complete absence of defensive posture, triggered professional caution. This wasn't bravado. It was certainty. From the facility behind her, voices crackled over the radio. "Stormfront cleanup teams on site, requesting your authorization for demolition charges." She keyed her mic, still watching the white-haired man disappear into the trees. "Authorized. Prep the structure. I want nothing recoverable." "Understood. Civilian casualties." "Acceptable." The radio clicked off. Stormfront stood for a moment longer, then lifted into the air. She had her orders. Whatever that man was, whatever he could do, he was someone else's problem now, unless he became hers again. In the tree line, Frenchie worked with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The portable terminal balanced on his knee, Ethernet cable snaking back toward the facility's last active junction box. 60 seconds before they'd cut external access. 60 seconds to pull everything that hadn't been wiped yet. "How much?" Butcher demanded. 30%. Maybe less. They're deleting faster than I can copy. Then copy faster. That's not how bandwidth works. I don't care how it works. I care that it works. Put a hand on Butcher's shoulder. "Let him concentrate." Butcher shrugged him off. "We came here for data. If we leave without it, we leave alive." Cut in. "That's the priority." "Since when?" "Since I started counting exits and realized we don't have any." Huey kept watch on Stormfront's position. She hovered near the facility coordinating teams. Black SUVs arrived in convoy, disgorging personnel in hazmat suits and tactical gear. They moved with the efficiency of people executing a rehearsed protocol. "They're setting charges," Huey said quietly. Frenchie didn't look up from the screen. "I know. How long do we have?" "Not long enough." The terminal beeped. Transfer rate plummeting. Frenchie cursed in French, tried rerouting through a backup connection. Dead. Tried another. Same result. "They've severed everything," he said. "I've got what I've got." "How much is that?" asked. "Personnel files, some experiment logs, authorization chains, not the medical data, not the full video archive." "So basically useless," Butcher spat. "Not useless, just incomplete." Kimiko signed rapidly. Huey translated. "She says we should leave. Now." "In a minute." "Butcher, they're planning explosives." "Then we've got time." "No." Gojo's voice flat and final. "You don't." Everyone turned. The man stood at the edge of their position, facing the facility. His blindfolded gaze seemed fixed on something none of them could see. "They're not just demolishing the building," he continued. "They're collapsing the sublevels. The blast will destabilize the ground within a quarter-mile radius." Frenchie pulled up a geological survey map. "He's right. There's an old aquifer underneath. If they breach it, we're in the flood zone," finished. Butcher's expression hardened. "How do you know that?" Gojo didn't answer. He was already walking toward the extraction point. The team followed. They moved fast through underbrush, navigating by moonlight and muscle memory. Explosions rumbled in the distance, not loud, but felt through the ground like a heartbeat stuttering. Trees swayed. Birds erupted from branches, fleeing instinctively. Frenchie stumbled, caught himself on a low-hanging branch. The terminal slipped from his grip. He lunged, caught it before impact, kept moving. "Tell me we got something worth this," said. "We got proof they were experimenting on adults, proof the program existed, That's not nothing. It's not enough to bring them down. Maybe not, but it's a start. The ground buckled. Not violently, more like a sigh, the earth settling as foundations below gave way. Cracks spiderwebbed across soil. Water began seeping up through fissures, cold and rank with minerals. Run, ordered. They ran. Gojo walked. The flood came faster than hydrology suggested it should. Aquifer pressure combined with deliberate structural collapse created a surge that consumed the facility and surrounding terrain in seconds. What had been solid ground became marsh, then lake, then temporary sea. The team reached high ground just as water claimed the tree line they'd occupied moments before. Frenchie collapsed, gasping. Huey bent double hands on knees. Kimiko stood watch-eyes, scanning for pursuit. Butcher turned to Gojo. You knew. Yes. How? Does it matter? Yeah, actually, it does. Gojo's attention remained on the transformed landscape. Water reflected moonlight, turning the scene almost peaceful. Beneath the surface, sage grove, and everything it had contained was already dissolving into silt and memory. You manipulate information the same way I manipulate space, Gojo said after a moment. You gather it, weaponize it, use it to change outcomes. I read structural stress energy distribution, probability collapse. We're doing the same thing with different tools. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Butcher held his gaze, or tried to. The blindfold made it impossible to tell if Gojo was even looking back. After a moment, Butcher turned away. Frenchie, tell me that terminal survived. Barely. Frenchie opened the casing. Water had seeped in, shorting some circuits. But the solid-state drive was intact, sealed in waterproof housing. Data's safe. Good, because that's all we're leaving with. Surveyed the flooded zone. Stormfront, airborne, probably coordinating cleanup from altitude. She get a good look at us. At Gojo, definitely. The team fell into uneasy contemplation. In the distance, Vaught's convoy retreated, mission accomplished. The facility was gone, the evidence buried. The survivors scattered or silenced. Everything had gone according to someone's plan, just not theirs. What now? Huey asked quietly. Butcher pulled out a cigarette, lit it despite the wet. Smoke curled upward, dissipating into cold air. Now we make sure this wasn't for nothing. How? Same way we always do. Leak it, all of it. Every file, every name, every authorization signature. Flood the zone with truth and see what survives. Vaught will bury it, Mum pointed out. They'll try, but even they can't plug every hole at once. Frenchie stood brushing mud from his jacket. I'll need access to secure servers, dead drops, anonymous channels. You'll have it. And time, at least 48 hours to distribute properly. You've got 24. That's not enough. It's what we have. Butcher's tone allowed no argument. Vaught's in cleanup mode now. That gives us a window. Small closing fast. We use it or we lose it. The team began moving toward the secondary extraction point, a mile northeast, through terrain that was rapidly becoming impassable. Gojo followed at his own pace, maintaining the distance that had become his default position, close enough to observe, far enough to disclaim involvement. Fell back to walk beside him. You saved us. Again. I prevented you from dying stupidly. There's a difference. Feels the same from where I'm standing. That's your misunderstanding, not mine. Shook his head. You know what I think? I think you're not as detached as you pretend. Think whatever helps you sleep. I think you could have left any time. But you're still here, because you haven't given me what I need yet. Sure. Keep telling yourself that. Gojo didn't respond. They walked in silence, the flooded ruins of Sage Grove fading behind them, the uncertain path ahead offering no comfort and no guarantees. By dawn, the lake would be drained, the evidence removed, the story rewritten, but the data would be out. Scattered across networks, copied onto drives, seeded in places even Vaught couldn't scrub clean. And somewhere in that distributed truth, the proof would wait. Patient, inevitable, ready to detonate when the moment came. The server room hummed with white noise, cooling fans, hard drives, spinning electricity flowing through circuits that had been abandoned by their original owners years ago. Frenchie had chosen this location specifically, a foreclosed data center in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Far enough from Vought's immediate reach, but close enough to fiber trunk lines that could handle the bandwidth they needed. 3 laptops arranged on a folding table. 6 external drives daisy-chained together. A portable router jury-rigged to bounce their signal through 7 proxies across 4 continents. Huey watched the upload progress bars crawl forward. 23%, 24. How long asked from the doorway where he stood watch. Frenchie didn't look up from the keyboard. 2 hours? Maybe 3 if the Chinese servers throttle us. We don't have 3 hours. Then pray for good bandwidth. Butcher paced the narrow space between server racks, cigarette dangling from his lips, despite the no smoking signs plastered on every surface. Ash drifted to the floor. He didn't care. What are we sending? He asked. Everything verifiable, Frenchie replied. Personnel records with authorization chains, medical logs with timestamps, video documentation of the experiments, financial transfers linking Vought's legal accounts to Sage Grove's operational costs, and the rest unusable, corrupted when they initiated the wipe. Too much noise, not enough signal. Huey highlighted a folder on his screen. What about the termination footage, the cells where they... Too graphic, cut in. Mainstream outlets won't touch it. Gets flagged as gore buried in content filters before anyone sees it. But it's proof. It's proof that gets dismissed as fake. Deep fake CGI, whatever excuse they want to use. We need documents, paper trails, things that can't be explained away. Frenchie opened a spreadsheet cross-referencing names against public corporate filings. I've isolated 14 executives with direct oversight. 7 doctors who signed off on experiment protocols. 4 lawyers who structured the liability shields. Send it all, Butcher said. To who? Everyone? The Times, the Post, ProPublica. Every hack journalist with an axe to grind and a deadline to meet. Shook his head. Too wide. Vought has legal teams that specialize in killing stories before they break. Scatter it that broadly and they'll plug every hole at once. So what's your suggestion? Targeted release. 3 outlets maximum. Give each one a different angle. Corporate malfeasance, medical ethics violations, illegal human trials. Let them compete for the exclusive. By the time Vought realizes what's happening, the story's already fractured into pieces they can't contain. Butcher took a long drag. And if they kill all 3, then we release the raw archives, flood the zone, but that's the nuclear option. Once we do that, we lose control entirely. The room fell into tense calculation. Kimiko stood near the emergency exit, signing occasional observations that Huey translated quietly. A van had passed twice in the last 10 minutes. Same, make different plates. Probably nothing. Probably. Gojo sat on a crate in the far corner, blindfolded, gaze angled toward nothing in particular. He hadn't spoken since they'd arrived. Frenchie's laptop beeped. A new window opened, intercepted communications scraped from Vought's internal network before the security team realized they had a breach. They know, Frenchie said. Everyone turned. Know what? Butcher demanded. That we have something. Not what, not how much, but they've activated containment measures. He scrolled through encrypted memos, timestamps showing escalating alert levels over the past 6 hours. Asset recovery teams deployed. Legal firewall protocols engaged. Media suppression units on standby. They're blind right now, observed. Throwing resources at a problem they can't see yet. Won't last. Frenchie highlighted a memo tagged Priority Alpha. They've assigned a lead investigator, someone with authority to use unorthodox methods. Huey leaned in. Does it say who? No name, just a designation. Frenchie tapped the screen. Asset HL1. The code meant nothing to Huey. Butcher's face went rigid. Homelander, he said quietly. They're sending him to clean this up. Huey's voice cracked. We're journalists at this point. We're not even a threat. You're the threat that embarrassed them, corrected. Broke into their black site, stole their secrets, made them destroy their own facility to cover it up. That's not a PR problem. That's a declaration of war. Butcher flicked ash onto the floor. Good, let the cunt come. No. Stepped between him and the laptops. That's not the play. We're not equipped to handle Homelander. We leak the information, we disappear, we let the fallout do the work. And when he tracks us anyway, then we make sure he has bigger problems than us. Huey looked at the upload bars. 31%. Still climbing, but too slow. If Homelander was already mobilized, if Vought's intelligence apparatus was closing the gap. We're sitting ducks here, he said. We're almost done, Frenchie countered. Almost isn't uploaded. Checked his watch. Frenchie, can you split the workload? Send what's ready now, cue the rest for automated release. Possible. But it reduces redundancy. If the automated process gets interrupted, then do it anyway. We need to be mobile in 30 minutes. Frenchie's fingers flew across the keyboard. Scripts executed. Archives compressed. Uploads branched into parallel streams. The progress bars multiplied, some moving faster, others crawling. Butcher crossed to where Gojo sat. You've been quiet. I have nothing to contribute to this conversation. Bullshit, you always got something to say. Gojo's head tilted fractionally. You're using information as a weapon. I manipulate physics. Different tools, same principle. But your weapon only works if the people receiving it choose to act on it. Mine works regardless of choice. So you think we're wasting our time? I think you're gambling that shame still functions in this system. That revealing atrocity will produce accountability. His tone carried no judgment, just observation. Based on what I've seen, that's optimistic. Then why are you still here? Because you haven't finished the job you agreed to do. Butcher's jaw clenched. And when we do, then I leave, like I told you from the start. Even if Homelander shows up. Especially then, the bluntness of it hung in the recycled air. Huey glanced at who gave a slight shake of his head. Not the fight to have. Not now. Frenchie's laptop chimed. First batch uploaded successfully. Distribution confirmed across 12 servers in 7 countries. Journalists in New York, London, and Berlin would find encrypted packages in dead drops by dawn. Timed releases scheduled for morning news cycles. That's the opening salvo, Frenchie announced. The rest will follow automatically unless we abort. Don't abort, Butcher said immediately. Held up a hand. We need to talk about exit strategy. Exit strategy as we finish the job. Exit strategy as we live to see the fallout. Big difference. You want to run before we even know if this worked. I want to not be standing in a traceable location when Vought triangulates our signal, which they will give in time. Butcher ground his cigarette out on the concrete. Fine. We move. But we don't stop. Next location, next upload, keep the pressure on until they're drowning in their own lies. Or until they drown us first, Huey muttered. Kimiko signed urgently. Huey translated. Vehicle outside. Slowing down. Killed the lights. The server room plunged into darkness, broken only by laptop screens and the faint glow of LED indicators on rack-mounted equipment. Through a gap in the boarded window, headlights swept across the parking lot. Black SUV, tinted windows, no plates visible. It circled once, twice, stopped near the entrance. Doors opened. 3 figures emerged silhouettes against streetlight. They moved with tactical precision, covering angles, checking perimeter, advancing on the building. Not Vought, whispered. Wrong gear. Frenchie zoomed in through a camera feed spliced into the building's defunct security system. Local contractors? Probably hired to scout before the real teams arrive. How long before they find us? Building's got 12 rooms. If they're thorough, maybe 10 minutes. Butcher drew his pistol. Did the same. Huey's hands shook as he closed the laptops, disconnecting cables with fumbling urgency. Gojo stood. You need time. We need a miracle, Butcher corrected. I can give you 5 minutes, maybe 6. How? By being elsewhere very loudly. He moved toward the door. MM grabbed his arm. What are you? The man was already gone. Not fled, just absent, as if he'd stepped through a seam in reality that closed behind him. Outside, one of the contractors shouted, then screaming. Not pain confusion. Their flashlight beams swung wildly, illuminating nothing. Radios crackled with static and contradictory reports. Gunfire brief, panicked. Then silence. The team fled. Engines roared, tires screeched. The SUV accelerated out of the lot, leaving behind only skid marks and shell casings. Gojo reappeared in the doorway. 5 minutes. Use them. They used 4. Laptops packed. Drive secured. Emergency exit accessed through a corridor that smelled like mildew and failed ventilation. They emerged 3 blocks away, near a drainage culvert, where their secondary vehicle waited, a different van, different plates, different identities, ready to activate. MM drove. Kimiko navigated. Frenchie monitored the uploads from a tablet. Butcher reloaded his weapon and stared out the window at the receding city lights. Huey sat beside Gojo in the back. What did you do to them? Convince them they were in the wrong place. How? Spatial displacement. They thought they were searching one building while actually moving through another nearby. Simple misdirection. That's not simple. Everything's simple if you control the right variables. Huey fell quiet. Outside Newark gave way to industrial sprawl. Warehouses, freight yards. The nocturnal infrastructure that kept the world running while daylight people slept. Frenchie's tablet pinged. Second batch uploading. European servers accepting the handoff. When does it go live? MM asked. 4 a.m. Eastern. Simultaneous drops in 3 time zones. By the time Vaught's legal team wakes up, the story will already be trending. And then we find out if the world still cares. Butcher lit another cigarette. It will. Because we're going to make sure Homelander can't ignore it. MM glanced in the rear view. Meaning we don't just leak the crime, we leak the cover-up. We leak his involvement. We make him the face of Sage Grove, whether he was there or not. That'll bring him straight to us. Yeah. Butcher smiled without warmth. That's the point. The warehouse had been gutted years ago. Machinery stripped for scrap walls tagged with graffiti that nobody bothered to paint over. Rain leaked through gaps in the corrugated roof, pooling on cracked concrete. The kind of place people avoided instinctively, which made it perfect. Butcher chose the location specifically. Far enough from residential zones that collateral damage wouldn't matter. Close enough to rail yards that extraction routes multiplied. Most importantly, no surveillance. Vought couldn't track what it couldn't see. The team spread across the space in defensive positions. MMM near the eastern loading dock, rifle resting on a pallet. Kimiko by the west wall, balanced on a rusted catwalk. Frenchie crouched behind a concrete pillar, monitoring radio frequencies for any sign of incoming tactical units. Huey stood near Butcher in the center of the empty floor, clutching a Glock he barely knew how to use. His role wasn't combat. It was bait. Gojo occupied the south corner away from the others, observing, waiting. He's coming, Frenchie said into his headset. Single signature, airborne, ETA 90 seconds. Butcher lit a cigarette. Good. Let the cunt land. What if he doesn't? Huey asked. What if he just uses heat vision from altitude? Then we duck, but he won't. Why not? Because he's curious. Butcher took a drag. Whoever leaked our position told him we've got something he needs to see for himself. Something about the Sage Grove intel that Vought can't let walk. He'll come down. He'll want to look us in the eye when he ends it. The roof shuddered. A sonic boom rolled across the sky. Homelander descended through an open section of ceiling boots, touching concrete with barely a sound despite the force of his landing. cape settled around his shoulders, suit immaculate despite the flight. He straightened, scanned the warehouse. His gaze passed over each team member, in turn cataloging threats, dismissing them. When he reached Gojo, he paused. "New face," Homelander said. His voice carried effortlessly across the empty space. "Vought doesn't have you in any database. That's unusual." Gojo didn't respond. Homelander's smile widened. "Strong, silent type. I respect that." He turned to Butcher. "Billy fucking Butcher. You've been busy, breaking into secure facilities, stealing proprietary research, spreading lies about American heroes." "Not lies," Butcher replied. "Just truths you'd rather stay buried." "See, that's where we disagree. Sage Grove was a tragedy, industrial accident, terrible loss of life. But you're trying to twist it into something it's not. We've got video. You've got deep fakes, manufactured evidence, the kind of propaganda enemies of this country use to undermine trust in our institutions." Butcher flicked ash onto the floor. "Funny how those institutions keep needing you to clean up their messes." Homelander's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Calculation becoming irritation. "This doesn't have to be difficult. Give me the drives, walk away. I'm willing to be generous." "Generous how? You get to keep breathing." MM's voice came through the radio, barely audible. "Butcher, we're surrounded. 3 SUVs blocking the access roads." Homelander's smile returned. "Just insurance, in case you choose difficult." Butcher dropped the cigarette, ground it out with his heel. "Thing is, I don't think you're here for drives. I think you're here because someone told you about him." He nodded toward Gojo. "Someone who tried to electrocute him and failed. Someone who realized she couldn't touch him and got scared." Homelander's attention swiveled back to Gojo. "Is that true?" "Yes." "What are you, enhanced, modified, some kind of Russian tech?" "None of those." "Then what?" "Someone who wants to leave." Homelander laughed, short, sharp. "Well, you should have left before pissing off Vought. Now you're a loose end, and I specialize in tying those up." He moved, superhuman speed crossing 30 feet in the time it took a normal person to blink. His fist swung toward Gojo's face with enough force to cave in concrete. It stopped, not blocked, not deflected, simply stopped, fist hanging in empty air 3 feet from its target. Homelander frowned, pushed harder. His arm trembled with exertion. The space between them refused to compress. He pulled back, circled right, tried again from a different angle. Same result. "Force field," he muttered. "Fancy. But everything breaks if you hit it hard enough." He pivoted toward Huey instead. If the strange man was protecting himself, maybe he couldn't protect others simultaneously. Classic tactical thinking. Exploit the weak link. Huey raised the Glock with shaking hands. Fired 3 times. The bullets ricocheted off Homelander's chest, sparking harmlessly. The man barely flinched. Homelander reached for him and found his hand gripping nothing. Huey was still there 5 feet away, untouched. The distance between them had expanded without either of them moving. Spatial geometry warping in ways that made depth perception lie. "What the fuck?" Homelander's voice lost its theatrical edge. Genuine confusion bled through. He tried heat vision. Twin beams lanced toward Gojo. Incandescent and focused. They scattered outward on contact with that invisible boundary, scoring black marks across the warehouse walls. Homelander tried speed, circling, looking for gaps, testing different vectors. Every approach yielded the same result. Proximity refused to occur. His breathing quickened, frustration mounting. This wasn't how it worked. He was Homelander, the strongest, the best. Things didn't just not work. He grabbed a steel girder from the wreckage around them, tore it free, swung it like a bat at Gojo's head with enough force to demolish a building. The girder crumpled against nothing, metal compressing, folding back on itself. Homelander dropped it, staring at the mangled steel. "You're cheating," he said, voice tight. "Some kind of trick, smoke and mirrors." "I'm just standing here," Gojo replied. "Bullshit." Homelander surged upward, flying to the ceiling. If he couldn't reach the man directly, he'd bring the whole structure down. He drove both fists into a support beam. Concrete exploded. Rebar shrieked as it tore. The ceiling began to collapse and stopped. Debris hung suspended mid-fall, frozen in place by invisible force. Dust drifted slowly, defying gravity. Gojo raised one hand. The rubble reversed direction, flying back upward, reforming the ceiling in rough approximation of its original shape. Not perfect, but functional. Homelander descended, landing hard. His cape was torn. Dust coated his suit. For the first time in years, he looked disheveled. "What the hell are you?" The question came out raw. Actual fear creeping into his voice. "Someone leaving," Gojo said. "As soon as you stop being in the way." Homelander charged again. Pure rage now, no strategy, just overwhelming force applied without restraint. He came at Gojo from above, below, flanking, trying to saturate every defensive angle simultaneously. None of it mattered. Gojo's hand moved, a small gesture barely noticeable. Homelander staggered. His eyes went unfocused. He reached for his head-mouth opening in a soundless scream. Every muscle locked. His flight faltered. He dropped, hitting concrete on his knees. Information flooded his consciousness. Not thoughts, not images. Raw sensory data, infinite and unfiltered, pouring into a mind designed to process singular focus. 6 eyes fed him everything simultaneously: molecular structures, gravitational fluctuations, electromagnetic spectra, quantum probabilities. The totality of observable reality compressed into a single instant. His brain couldn't handle it. Neural pathways overloaded, synapses misfired. He tried to stand, fell, tried to speak, managed only a wet, choking sound. Unlimited void ended. Homelander collapsed fully. Not unconscious, worse. Aware but unable to process awareness into action. Muscles refused commands. Balance centers failed. Vision registered light but couldn't parse meaning from it. He lay on the concrete, twitching. Drool leaked from the corner of his mouth. Eyes stared at nothing. Butcher crossed the floor, stood over him, drew his pistol, pressed it to Homelander's temple. The man didn't react. Couldn't. His nervous system was a shattered instrument trying to play music with broken strings. Butcher's hand trembled. "Do you know how long I've wanted this?" Homelander's eyes tracked vaguely toward the voice. No comprehension in them. All the people you killed? All the lies you told? Butcher's finger tightened on the trigger. All the times you smiled like you were God's gift to the fucking world. He pulled the trigger. The gun clicked. Misfire. Or empty. He'd lost count of rounds during the initial exchange with Huey. Butcher hurled the weapon aside. Drew a knife instead. Pressed it to Homelander's throat. The blade bit skin and stopped. Enhanced durability. Even debilitated, the man's biology resisted penetration. "Fuck!" Butcher pressed harder. The knife bent. "Fuck!" He looked up at Gojo. "You, finish it." "No, that wasn't a request. I don't take orders." "Then consider it part of the deal. The deal was extraction and protection during your mission." "This is neither." Butcher surged to his feet. "He's right fucking there. Helpless. You put him down and we're done. We go our separate ways. I have no reason to kill him. He's a monster. So are half the creatures in my world. I don't kill them either, unless they threaten something I care about. This man threatened you. Not me. Then do it for..." Butcher struggled for leverage. For the people he killed. For justice. "I don't do justice. I enforce boundaries." His boundaries with me are settled. What he did to you is your concern. Butcher's control shattered. He lunged at Gojo and hit the same barrier that had stopped Homelander. Invisible. Absolute. He pounded against it with both fists, achieving nothing. You coward, you sanctimonious piece of... grabbed him from behind. Butcher, stop! Get off me. We're leaving. Now. I'm not done. Yes, you are. MM's grip tightened. Look around. Vaught's teams are closing. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this place swarms. You want to die here, beating your fists bloody against something that won't budge? Fine. But I'm not dying with you. Butcher struggled. Held firm. Finally, something in Butcher broke. Not acceptance, just exhaustion. He went limp. Released him. Frenchie, route, north exit, rail yard. I've got a car positioned. Move! The team converged on the loading dock. Huey cast one last look at Homelander's prone form. The man hadn't moved. Might not move for hours. Days. Vought would recover him. Spin the story. Bury the truth under layers of plausible deniability. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. They fled into rain-slick streets. Sirens wailed in the distance. Searchlights swept the warehouse perimeter. The trap was closing, but closing on an empty building and a debilitated asset. Gojo remained inside. He stood over Homelander, studying the wreckage. Not triumph, just observation. The man would recover. Eventually. His nervous system would reassemble itself. He'd remember this. The humiliation, the powerlessness. Good. Let him remember what it felt like to be insignificant. Gojo turned toward the north exit. Frenchie had left coordinates for a rendezvous point. They'd completed their end. Now, he needed his. He paused at the threshold. Rain hammered the pavement beyond. Lightning cracked the sky. Somewhere in that storm, the boys were running. Somewhere behind him, Vaught's machinery ground into motion. And somewhere ahead, if Frenchie's calculations held a pathway home, waited. Gojo stepped into the rain. The warehouse emptied. Homelander remained on the concrete alone, broken, waiting for rescue that would come with questions he couldn't answer. And consequences he couldn't escape. No cameras recorded it. No witnesses lived to tell. The truth stayed buried in the spaces between official reports and classified briefings. Just another night in a world that ate its gods and called it protection. The safe house smelled like rust and old insulation. A single bulb hung from exposed wiring, casting weak light across the space. Frenchie had the components spread across a work table, salvaged circuit boards, the broken stabilizer from Sage Grove, a power regulator, scavenged from Vaught's secondary storage facility 3 days prior. Gojo stood near the far wall observing. He'd been there since dawn, patient and detached, watching Frenchie work without offering commentary or assistance. Leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. Huey sat on an overturned crate, occasionally glancing at the assembly process, mostly staring at nothing. Kimiko occupied a corner, motionless. Butcher was absent. Had been since they'd extracted from the warehouse. Nobody asked where. Nobody needed to. Almost done. Frenchie muttered more to himself than anyone else. His hands moved with practiced precision, soldering connections, calibrating voltage thresholds, triple-checking polarity. The device resembled nothing recognizable. A cylinder wrapped in wire and thermal shielding jury-rigged components held together by epoxy and hope. Will it work? Asked. In theory, and in practice, we'll know when he activates it. Gojo approached the table. Frenchie stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans. That's everything. Based on the schematics from Sage Grove and the readings I took when you first arrived. Power's stable. Spatial resonance should align with the original breach signature. Should Gojo repeated. I'm a technician, not a physicist. This is educated guesswork with expensive parts. Gojo picked up the device, turned it over in his hands. examined the connections without touching them. After a moment, he nodded. It'll work. How do you know? Because I can feel the distortion already. The frequencies match. Frenchie exhaled. Tension bled from his shoulders. Good. Then we're done. Yeah, said quietly. We're done. Huey stood. So you just activate it and go? Yes. What happens to the breach after? Does it stay open? No. It collapses immediately. Unstable geometry can't sustain itself. So this is it. One way. No coming back. Gojo met his gaze through the blindfold. I was never planning to come back. Huey nodded slowly. He looked like he wanted to say something else. Didn't. Sat back down. The door opened. Butcher entered, jacket soaked from the drizzle outside. He carried a fifth of whiskey, half empty. He crossed to the table, set the bottle down with a heavy thunk. His eyes tracked to Gojo. Heard you're leaving? Yes. Good. Butcher pulled out a cigarette, lit it. World's got enough freaks. Doesn't need another one who thinks he's above it all. I never thought I was above it. Just separate from it. Same thing to the people you left behind to deal with your mess. I didn't create Sage Grove, or Homelander, or Vought. Those were already here. But you made them worse. I made them visible. What you do with that visibility is your problem. Butcher's jaw tightened. For a moment it looked like he might swing. His fists clenched, unclenched. He took a long drag instead. You really don't give a shit, do you? About your war with Vought number? About anything? About going home? Everything else is incidental. Butcher laughed short, bitter. At least you're honest. More than I can say for most people with power. Power doesn't make people dishonest. It just gives them more opportunities to be what they already are. Philosophy? Great, just what I needed. Butcher turned to leave, paused at the threshold, spoke without looking back. For what it's worth, and it's not worth much, you held up your end. Can't say I'd have done the same. He left. The door swung shut. Pushed off from the doorframe. Ignore him. He's got his own demons. I know. Do you? I recognize obsession when I see it. Your friend is dying from the inside because he can't let go of something that already killed him. Had no response to that. He glanced at Huey, who looked away. Frenchie cleared his throat. The device needs to charge. 10 minutes. Then it's ready. Gojo set the cylinder on the table, stepped back, waited. The minutes crawled. Nobody spoke. The bulb flickered occasionally. Water dripped somewhere in the building's infrastructure. Traffic noise filtered in from the street, distant, muffled, unimportant. Frenchie checked his tablet. Charged, resonance stable, whenever you're ready. Gojo picked up the device, held it in both hands. A faint hum emanated from the core, not mechanical, but spatial. The sound of geometry bending. He triggered the activation sequence. The air split. No light show. No dramatic thunder. Just a wrongness that made the eyes want to look away. Space folded, creating an aperture that shouldn't exist. A vertical seam in reality, edges shimmering like heat distortion. Through it, glimpses of elsewhere. Different architecture, different sky, different rules. Gojo turned to face the team one last time. Your leak will cause problems for Vought. Short term, they'll adapt. Find new ways to hide their operations, different facilities, better security, tighter controls. You bought yourselves time. Use it. That's it? Huey asked. That's all you've got to say? What else do you want? I don't know. Something. Acknowledgement that this mattered. It mattered to you. That's enough. Gojo stepped toward the breach. Paused halfway. One more thing. Homelander will recover. Eventually. When he does, he'll remember. Make sure you're not where he expects you to be. Nodded. We'll move. We always do. Gojo walked through the aperture. The breach collapsed. Air rushed inward to fill the vacuum, then stabilized. The wrongness vanished. The space returned to normal dimensions, just a safe house, just a table, Just a handful of people who'd survived something they barely understood. Frenchie packed his tools methodically. Checked his phone. Huey stared at the spot where the breach had been. Kimiko signed. Huey translated reflexively. She says we should leave. This location's compromised. She's right, agreed. He pulled car keys from his pocket. Frenchie, wipe everything. Huey, grab the hard copies. I'll prep the vehicle. They moved with practiced efficiency. Within 20 minutes, the safe house was empty. Surfaces wiped, equipment packed. No trace they'd ever been there. The van pulled away from the curb, merged into traffic, disappeared into the city's endless circulation. Behind them, the building stood quiet. Rain continued falling. Streetlights reflected in puddles. The world carried on, indifferent. In another reality, Gojo emerged into sunlight and familiar energy signatures. The breach sealed behind him. He took a breath, oriented himself, started walking. In this reality, the boys drove south toward another safe house, another temporary shelter. The leaked files were already spreading across networks. Journalists were asking questions Vought couldn't easily suppress. The damage had begun. It wouldn't be enough. It never was, but it was something. Butcher sat in the passenger seat, whiskey bottle between his knees, watching the city scroll past. Drove in silence. Frenchie monitored news feeds on his tablet. Huey stared out the window. Kimiko slept. Nobody spoke about the man who'd been with them. Nobody mentioned Homelander's fate. Nobody asked what came next. They already knew. The same thing that always came next. Survival, exposure, running. Again and again until the system broke, or they did. The van kept moving. The city kept breathing. The world kept turning. And in the spaces between official reports and classified briefings, the truth remained unproven, unacknowledged, but persistent. A man who shouldn't exist had been there, had left, and everything else stayed exactly as broken as before.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to turn on notification so you won't miss out future videos. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.